Let all mortal flesh keep silence, and with fear and trembling stand. Wonder nothing earthly minded, for with blessing in his hand, Christ our God to earth descended, our full homage to demand. The Lord sends out the 12 as follows. As you go, proclaim that the kingdom of heaven is close at hand. When they go, they give the signs of the arrival of that kingdom that is healing over nature and that is freeing from demonic power. But they too are asked to be free and unhampered. They are going without money, but the Lord gives them the assurance that they will be provided for the workman deserves his keep. Therefore, the person who engages in the Lord's work is not attached even to that specific work, but is able to take off and fly at the Lord's slightest bidding. The eyes fixed on Jesus. Great saints, great founders, like St. Francis, have taken this very seriously, but it applies unto us all. Whatever town or village you go into, ask for someone trustworthy and stay with him until you leave. Here, the providence of God comes directly into play. He puts people on our path, and we are provided for if it is Jesus that we are serving directly. And then this element of stability, and stay with him until you leave. And then this element of the presence of peace wherever we go, and if the house is able to receive it, that peace will remain there. We need to carry peace into all the activity that we do. If we take the Lord's word seriously, then that is the first evangelization, that we radiate warmth wherever we go. If, on the other hand, in the interests of getting the Lord's work right, that warmth becomes lacking, then we are a counter-witness, as when missionaries might arrive from different ecclesiastical situations, different denominations, into one part of darkest Africa, and arrive in a village and start by arguing amongst themselves. The local villagers would be quite justified in saying, put yourselves in agreement before you come. So too, if in the Lord's work the opposite of peace is coming out of our being or out of our doing, then the Lord is unable to bless, and we are a nuisance rather than a help in the work of the gospel. Let your peace then descend upon it. And then the Lord indicates what to do if there is unpeace and therefore unrest in people's heart, which expresses itself in a refusal of the word. We do not insist. He's quite Semitic, obviously, as he would be in his way of putting it, because he speaks in his own culture as a man born there in the strong Hebrew culture of the time. He says to shake off the dust from their feet. Gestures are eloquent. But it can be our case as well. What happens if people do not accept our word, either in a conversation or in a sermon? One time I was preaching in a large charismatic group, and I overheard somebody saying something, and I was told afterwards what had been said, and audibly, and the person started to get up actually and to walk out, until I stopped and looked at that person while she did so, and when she realized she was being looked at, she sat down there where she was, therefore in another place. And what she had said apparently was, "Did you hear that?" Now, if this kind of thing is going on in a charismatic group, a large one, what is going on there? If plain Christian truths are being told, and they have been hearing so much of the other that you cannot anymore say certain things, then there is something very spooky going on, even in certain circles. One cannot bypass the truth in the interest of apparent charism. The Lord is not free himself to bless in depth disobedience. I tell you solemnly, on the day of judgment it will not go as hard with the land of Sodom and Gomorrah as with that town. And one often wonders how many, for instance, sincere, humble housewives who have only known what they grew up with in whatever church circle it might have been, perhaps way away from the Catholic Church, but very pious, very faithful to their conscience. Maybe they are shining souls, far more than those who have had all the truth but have not been faithful to it. We must be careful, because sanctity is one thing and dogma is another. It is true that dogma normally has also an effect on sanctity, because truth has an effect on the intellect. But God alone sees the soul. Sometimes in life we can go this way or that way. Sometimes moments change all moments, and sometimes they're not the most noisy moments which do so. When in Holland recently, in the Mass of the Octave of Corpus Christi, in a place of perpetual adoration, for they were keeping the octave in its entirety with great solemnity and devotion, I mentioned how in school days, because the Catholic Church happened to be right next to the bus stop where I would get off the bus sometimes, and it was the only church open in the area, I would sometimes walk in. And though an evangelical Protestant at the time, there was something there, and I could sense it. And I was drawn to the tabernacle on the high altar, which still was unchanged in those days, and it was very, very unusual. As I got closer to it, I could sense that there was something wholly different there. And I have heard since that other Protestants have had similar experiences. Indeed, there was a case in Poland some years ago under the communist regime when the son of high-ranking communist officials had gone into a local church with aggressive ideas and had been fulminated, knocked between the eyes. There was exposition going on at the time, and he heard actually a voice. I exist, and you will be my priest. He went to the local bishop, who was initially dismissive, knowing his background, but then when he insisted, he realized there was something going on in his soul, and he was ordained eventually and became a very holy and good priest. But these quiet moments are the moments which change all without noise, or as we would say, fuss or bother. As in human relationships, often the most profound moments are not moments when people talk loudly or even talk at all, but quietly feel each other's presence and are content therewith. For the less is said, the more is known. So too, in intimacy with the Lord, the less is said, more is known. I just conclude with the consequence of hearing the initial call. It led, of course, through different channels, of course under providence all along, to a bishop who ordained. In fact, here he is. He's still alive. The then Archbishop of Siena, who also has another brother, a bishop. They're both retired by now. But he ordained first of all to the diaconate there, that's in our monastery, and then he ordained 2 monks to the priesthood in his own cathedral. That was his own idea. He wanted that to show that we also belonged to the diocese and were a presence for the whole church there. And usually in these high moments one senses a grace and a peace, but one doesn't have huge tangible experiences, because it's much more profound, although it can have an effect on every level and will. But I remember quite unexpectedly when it came to the ordination to the priesthood, without in any way producing anything or wanting or looking for anything, but it was an objective moment which had an objective effect on also my soul and my mind. For I remember this moment, the actual moment during the paragraph, the consecratory paragraph, which changes you from deacon to priest, at the consecratory words of ordination. At that point, I remember, because my eyes were closed, the actual moment of ordination, I, as it were, saw, and it wasn't being fabricated at all, just for a fraction of a second, my soul being taken out of my body and inserted in the bosom of the Trinity, and with the smile of the Eternal Father being put back, sealed, singed, ontologically, eternally changed. And it was a tiny spark of unveiling of what was going on, for that indeed was the truth, and it would be the truth in the case of anybody who receives that grace coming from the upper room through the succession of hands of bishops, even should they, like Judas, go the other way, because it carries them also into the beyond, in that case for their greater pain. But coming back then to the monastery, because the prior had, as they would do in Italy, got the faculties for confession very quickly, even though that might not happen initially in Italy straight away, it could happen later on, quite a bit later on. He did, in Italian mode, just get them from the bishop straight away, because I was going to Ireland to celebrate first masses, and the bishop said that it was enough at that point. Yes, he has the faculties. So that very night, my next door neighbour in the monastery, we were actually in the church, in the Abbey church, after Compline, we were saying the rosary quietly in private there as we would, before the statue, the old medieval statue of Blessed Lady, and he whispered if I could hear his confession. I think actually the other way around, he'd heard, I think my confession had been his first as well. He'd been ordained a little earlier. And so I did. And I remember getting then into my room and writing these lines here, because so much was happening in a short time. There was a change from deacon to presbyter. There was the concelebration with the bishop, and also with the retired bishop, who was Dominican, 2 bishops at the altar, and all our brethren and the clergy of the diocese. Therefore the first Mass as well was there. And then there were all these blessings, with all the people who were coming for blessings. And then this first absolution. All that in the matter of minutes or hours. And getting back into my cell, I quietly wrote this, because it was a moment of cosmic order. So I just quietly tried to take it in with these words. After the moment is the title, and immediately after first absolution. So it was the 31st of October in the night, 1997. After the moment. O King of Kings, O Lord of all that is this all true? Is this all happening? A word, a touch, a paragraph of his. Did it so loudly through the aeons ring? It did, my Lord, and I did feel thy hold upon my aching soul. For in a spark I saw with sight of light untold, my being torn to heaven for one deep mark. I did, O Alpha, for a second see, as 'twere the face of ancient Godhead there, where I was briefly caught, and I saw thee, the Ancient of all days, enthroned there, unchanged, unhurried, waiting for this word, that every soul through kingdom come well heard. Vere sanctus est Domini, fons omnis sanctitatis. Et ergo dona quesumus, Spiritus Tui rore sanctifica, ut nobis corpus et sanguis fit, Domini nostri Iesu Christi, qui cum passione voluntarie traderetur, accepit panem, et gratias agit, pregit, deditque discipulis suis dicens, accipite et manducate ex hoc omnes, hoc est enim corpus meum quod pro vobis tradetur. Simile modo postquam cenadunt, accipiens et calicem, iterum gratias agens, dedit discipulis suis dicens, accipite et bibite ex eo omnes, hic est enim calix sanguinis mei, novi et eterni testamenti, qui pro vobis et pro multis effundetur in remissionem peccatorum, hoc faciete in meam commemorationem. Mysterium fidei, mortem tuam annunciamus Domine, et tuam resurrectionem confitemur, donec venias. Memoris dicitur, mortis et resurrectionis eus, tibi Domine panem vitae et calicem salutis oferimus, gratias agentes, quia nos dignos abuisti, a stare coram te et tibi ministrare, et supplices te precavur, ut corporis in sanguinis Christi participes, a Spiritus Sancto congregemur in unum. Ecordare Domini, Ecclesiae tuto orbi diffusi, odium in caritate perficias, una cum Papa nostro Francisco, et Episcopo nostro Michaele, et universo clero. Memento etiam fratrum nostrum, qui in spe resurrectionis dormi erunt, omniumque in tua miseratione defunctorum, et eius in numen vultus tui admite. Omnium nostrum quae sumus miserere, ut cum beata Dei Genefice Virgine Maria, beato Iosef eius sponso, beatis apostolis, et omnibus sanctis, qui tibi a seculo placuerunt, eterne vitae mereamur esse consortes, et te laudemus et glorificemus per Filium tuum, Iesum Christum. Per ipsum et cum ipsum et in ipsum est tibi Deo Patri omnipotenti, in unitate Spiritus Sancti, omnis honor et gloria, per omnia saecula saeculorum. Amen. It is sweet to sing this winged seraph, cherubim with sleepless eye, veil their faces in the presence, as with ceaseless voice they cry, Alleluia.